In the heart of Edmonton's Old Glenora neighbourhood, you'll find two of Edmonton's most striking heritage buildings, each representing a very different era in the city's architectural and social history. The Grand Dame of the park is Government House, Alberta's original Lieutenant Governor's mansion, which opened in 1913. The imposing three-story sandstone building was designed in a Jacobean revival style by Edmonton architect Richard Palin Blakey, who hailed from Durham, England. It was built as a fitting seat of power for the King's representative in Alberta, a true British manor house transplanted to what was then the middle of a wilderness on the western outskirts of the city. The house had 13 bedrooms, including 7 bedrooms for servants, and boasted its own elevator. But plans for a grand ballroom had to be scrapped because Alberta's first Lieutenant Governor, George Headley Vickers Bullier, a devout Baptist, disapproved of dancing. The residence, which came complete with a Tudor-style carriage house, served as the vice-regal home until 1938, when Premier William Bible Bill Aberhart got into a ferocious political fight with the then Lieutenant Governor John Bowen. When Bowen refused to sign a series of unconstitutional bills, Aberhart evicted him from the mansion and sold off all the furnishings, curtains, china, silverware at fire sale prices in the city's biggest ever yard sale. After many other incarnations and adventures, the building is now a government conference center and the backdrop for 1,000 wedding photos. But to me, the mansion's modernist neighbor is every bit as marvelous a heritage building. This is Alberta's original provincial museum, later known as the Royal Alberta Museum. It was designed and brought to life by Raymond Harrison, an Australian architect who cut his teeth working on sleek and futuristic buildings in the international style in Vancouver. But he became fascinated by museums in particular, and in 1962 he was hired by Alberta to create every aspect of this museum, inside and out. His design follows the international style with its clean, spare elegance, its strong horizontal and vertical lines. In order to preserve all its artifacts, the museum building had very few windows. Harrison was worried that it would feel too massive, too imposing. He wanted it to feel warm and welcoming. So he decided to clad the building in light, blonde Manitoba Tyndallstone, and to break up the mass of the building into separate sections. The museum faces inward, away from the surrounding neighborhood and toward the North Saskatchewan River Valley, and its L shape seems to embrace and hug Government House. When the building opened in 1967, the L leg held the provincial archives. Today, like the rest of the building, it is empty. There's a new Royal Alberta Museum, a new RAM downtown, and there's a huge new provincial archives building deep on Edmonton's south side. But this graceful building, opened as a centennial project, stands as a reminder of the optimism and aspirations of its era. Art was an important part of the museum project from its very inception. Carved right into the sandstone walls, you'll find this remarkable work by Medicine Hat artist Luke Lindo, who was a painter, a sculptor, and a ceramicist. These carvings are meticulously based on the ancient petroglyphs and pictograms at Writing on Stone Provincial Park, near Milk River in southern Alberta. Lindo said these were exact copies, though larger than life and slightly reorganized. He was tremendously excited by the commission. He later wrote, "It had to swing enough to be exciting to me, or I would never have gotten such a complicated thing moving." And swing it did. Even today, these carvings connect us to Alberta's deepest past. While, at the same time, raising questions that were probably never considered in 1967 about the ethics of having a non-Indigenous artist appropriate these powerful images to include them in the walls of a museum that was, in many ways, a celebration of settler triumphalism. Those carvings certainly aren't the only art. 5 different sculptures grace the building, all commissioned from one artist, Ole Holmsten, an award-winning Swedish-Canadian sculptor who was at the time a professor of sculpture at the Alberta College of Art in Calgary. My favorite one, I think, is this 5-foot-tall bronze called the Storyteller. Cast in a foundry in New York, it has stood here at the front of the museum building for more than 50 years. On the east and west sides of the museum are 2 giant bronze friezes, each about 16 feet across. The one on the building's east side celebrates Alberta's natural history, from a triceratops to a woolly mammoth, from a bear to a bison. The frieze on the west side of the building, which is supposed to illustrate the evolution of Alberta's economy, has aged less well. the stereotypical depiction of an Indigenous chief, the fact that all the working people are men, the fact that the only woman is depicted as a kind of fertility goddess. Well, the work certainly captures some of the mindset of social credit Alberta in the 1960s, but it's an uncomfortable artifact to be sure. And some of that same discomfort is summoned by Holmeston's 7-foot sculpture, The Pioneer Family. It's powerful, moving, inspiring, and at the same time, a literal celebration of colonialism. On the other hand, Holmeston's 5th and final work for the museum, his most ambitious, a fantastical sculptural fountain named Futuristic, has aged poorly in a completely different, more literal sense. The fountain features 4 concrete wings that face northeast, northwest, southeast, and southwest, with 4 abstract bronze reliefs depicting classical Greek-inspired nudes, cradled between the wings. The sculpture was meant to stand in a shallow, blue-tiled reflecting pool, with deep blue porcelain tiles especially imported from Japan. Today, though, it sits, sadly, dry, broken, abandoned. Over the years, people tried various preventative conservation measures, which sometimes made things worse. Someone at some point thought it would be a grand idea to pump polyurethane foam filler behind the bronze reliefs. But that ended up bleaching out the concrete, and it failed to prevent copper staining on the sculpture. The water feature had to be shut off for several years due to corroding and leaking water pipes, and then when the necessary plumbing repairs were done, they damaged the pool membrane and caused the beautiful tiles to heave. Now, new provincial health regulations prohibit filling the pool with water at all. The result, a neglected legacy, especially heartbreaking since I think this was Holmeston's finest contribution to the museum site. Over the years, other works of art have taken up residence on the Graham grounds and done a better job of aging in place. In 1983, Alberta was given this elegant totem pole carved by Earl Muldow, an artist from the Gitxsan First Nation. It was a gift to the city and the province to commemorate our role in hosting the Universiade Student Games. The carver would go on to inherit the title of Chief Delgamuuk and become a hereditary chief of his people. And in that role, he would go on to fight and win a landmark Supreme Court case which determined that Indigenous title had not been extinguished when British Columbia joined Confederation. In 2004, Alberta was given this delicate, vibrant Jeongja, a traditional Korean pavilion designed to celebrate the connection between man and nature. Jeongja are made without nails or screws, entirely of wood and stone, traditionally painted with floral designs and usually set to have a majestic view of nature, as this one has. This was a gift to the province to celebrate the 30th anniversary of Alberta's twinning with the South Korean province of Gangwon. And in 2006, the museum hosted an outdoor art show celebrating the work of acclaimed Edmonton abstract sculptor Peter Hyde. This piece by Hyde, called The King of Clubs, has stood outside the museum ever since. But the oldest artifact on the grounds is this 65-million-year-old fossilized tree stump, which was collected from the bed of the McLeod River near Edson. So what happens to this art and this architecture now? Okay, so it probably won't last 65 million years, but the old Ram building has lots of life left. How do we preserve, restore, rejuvenate, and repurpose this remarkable site, which holds so much Alberta history? I'm hoping that this tour and this video tour might inspire some answers.